You know when you look back at fighters, from 80s, Julian, right? Leonard Duran, Hagler, Hearns, and we always hark back to them. Who would you take from this last 30 year to match them? Who would you put next to them?
I mean, I've already mentioned one of them. I mean, whilst he wasn't my cup of tea, personality-wise, Floyd Mayweather was a phenomenal fighter. Technically, he's just absolutely superb. I think I would probably lean towards a prime Duran and a prime Leonard over Mayweather, but I think Mayweather was also started at lightweight or junior sub featherweight like Duran, Leonard was a fully fledged welterweight. But I think Mayweather could have hung in that era. It's just such a difficult one. There's been some great fighters. I mean, Oscar De La Hoya and Mosley and Trinidad, those were great guys. But I don't know if they would have, would Trinidad have beaten Thomas Hearns? I doubt it. But he could have still hung in that era. It's so difficult, Russell, to judge, isn't it? I think Evander Holyfield was a great fighter. And he was 80s, wasn't he? But he obviously went across generations. There's some good fighters now. I think, I'm focusing on the welterweights, but
I think you put Mayweather, Canelo, Triple G for starters, wouldn't you? You put them.
Yeah, they're definitely hanging that era. Whether I think they would beat some of those great champions, I'm not too sure. I mean, if I look at the 80s, that era, it was rich all the way down, wasn't we? Like Larry Holmes and with Spinks Braxton, and we got Marvin Hagler, Thomas Hearns, Ray Leonard, Arguello, Pryor, Sanchez Gomez. We went all the way down. It was kind of rich across all the eras, but those guys fought each other, and that's one of the problems that we've got now is because they're not all fighting each other. We don't truly know who's special. So I mentioned before, and some people disagreed again, but looking at the best fighters today, and I mentioned Tank Davis. I think Tank's a superb fighter. I don't think he's had that marquee fight yet, and he's moving on with his career. He needs to get a move on, but technically he's brilliant. I think he would have given a lot of good fighters from the 80s a good fight. I'm not saying he would have beaten them, by the way, but he would have been there. But Canelo, yes. I always have issues with Canelo on the failed drugs test, like you do, like a lot of people do. But you can't deny Canelo's a great fighter. You just can't. We can't look too much into the Bivol fight because maybe just reached the bridge too far against a much bigger, younger guy. But, who would you have? I mean, it's a question for you. It's not answering your question directly, but who would you put higher in the pound for pound listing, Bivol or Canelo?
Well, on achievements, you'd have to say Canelo, wouldn't you?
Yeah, I would say Canelo pound for pound is better than Bivol. I'd just say he's not bigger than him.
Yeah.
But yeah, there's some. I want to see the lightweights because Haney and Kambosis, that's a good fight. I think Lomachenko, what's happening with him? I think he's still a gifted fighter. Lomachenko, just because he's such a brilliant fighter.
What do you think of Tank Davis's performance?
I've only seen the highlights. I mean, it was a beautiful counter, wasn't it? The way he spun him and turned him and drilled him, there was no lucky punch there. It was lights out, and it was an absolute fantastic finish. I think people say a heart back to the 80s. A heart back to the 80s more because we got the fights and we got people fighting consistently. We wouldn't see Larry Holmes fight once a year in his heyday in 78, 9, 80. We'd see him fight 4 times a year. And that's all I want to see from today's fighters. I'm not saying that every single fighter in the 80s would beat every single fighter today.
Hey, listen, Ray Leonard didn't want to fight Aaron Pryor, did he?
Well, some people said that, and then there were, that he did get an offer to fight. Pryor got an offer to fight Ray Leonard of 750 grand. He turned it down. He got offered $1 million, turned it down, and he went in his own direction. But Pryor was a fantastic fighter. The Hawk, he was certainly one I used to love watching. In fact, I watched him with Arguello the other night. I put it on for about the 15th time in the last few years. But just it was rich because the guys fought each other. And I think if you look at the lightweights now, I've just mentioned some of them, but you got Tank Davis, you got Cambosis, keep Lopez in the mix, you got Garcia. Any of those fighters on any given night could beat each other. And that's why it's such a sin. Look at the light heavyweights. You asked me outright some questions on the light heavyweights the other night. Who do you think are winning? Them and them and them and them and them. But once again, we've got some fantastic domestic light heavyweights who could probably beat each other on any given night. And we're not getting that. So people are not proving the greatness. What did we want for Tyson Fury? He'd beat Joshua, but we wanted Tyson Fury to unify, didn't we? We wanted him to beat Joshua, knock Joshua out, beat him, fight 3 times a year, boom, 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 boom. It's such a different landscape now. We're not getting to see that. And we're not seeing any of these. We're seeing good fights. We're seeing some people pitched together, but the classic example of today's fractured sport is Errol Spence and Terence Crawford. Those are I'm not saying stylistically, but Spence and Crawford are the Leonard and Hearns of their day in terms of the 2 premier welterweights. How long have we been talking about them 2 fighting for now?
Yeah, I think it's a bit like Pacquiao, Mayweather, that were overdone, wasn't it?
It came way too late, didn't it? I mean, I think Floyd would have always won that fight. But
they had cheek to talk about a rematch last year, didn't they? I mean, what planet are these people on?
It was, it was tame. I thought Pacquiao's performance was tame. I thought Floyd was technically brilliant, as he always is. But you're cheating the fans, aren't you? Because Floyd wasn't going for Pacquiao when Pacquiao was smashing De La Hoya, Cotto, and Hatton. He'd already had a couple of knockouts by that time, hadn't he? He'd lost to Marquez. He'd had a debatable decision with Marquez, and it had lost its flavour, hadn't it? And Floyd was so dominant that night. It's just such a shame, and I just want to see. I want to see the great fights. Listen, we've always missed out on big fights. You mentioned some earlier on. We didn't get Lennox Lewis and Riddick Bowe, did we? We didn't get Larry Holmes and George Foreman. We're not saying that the previous generations always delivered the big fights. History's littered with fights that didn't happen. But it's every division now, isn't it? You're not getting the fights that you want. And that's the frustrating thing.
Yeah, it is. Could you imagine Roberto Duran back in days turn around and say, I'm not fighting Ryan Garcia?
It just wouldn't have happened, would it? If Garcia had been on social media ripping the shit out of Duran would have turned up at his fucking gym with his gloves, and he'd have fucking beat him senseless. And that was Roberto Duran. That's why those guys were special. I mean, you look at Hagler. Hagler had over 50 fights by the time he won the middleweight championship of the world. He'd already been in wars. That's why are you going about the 80s again? Because we're trying to explain the difference in cultures now. You have 6 fights now, they talk about a British title. 12 fights, they talk about a world title. And I mean, not saying that's never happened before, but consistently fighters would have had at least 25, 30 fights and boxed at world level before they fought for world titles. But now, listen, anybody who wins a version of a world title's done an amazing achievement. But it's not the achievement that it used to be, is it? Let's be honest.
Listen, I get excited when I see an eliminator because we never see many eliminators, do we?
We don't do them, do we? And I like to see the big domestic fights. We got Eubank and Williams. It took me right back to when we had Errol Christie and Mark Kaler and those guys and Simpson.
Errol Christie, Mark Kaler.
What a fight. Bomber Graham, Mark Kaler, Tony Simpson against Finnegan, Tony Simpson against Minter. We've just mentioned there 5 domestic fights with top middleweights in the world-class middleweights in the UK fighting each other. When does that happen?
What about Dave Allen and Cash Ali? We could have that, couldn't we?
Let them have a go. That might be an exciting fight. There's little between those two. They could fight 5 times and one could win 3 and the other could win 2. Everybody would have a good fight. Everybody enjoy it. And guess what? Cash Ali loses to Dave Allen. Does it affect his career? Not at all, because he's kind of under the radar.
And vice versa.
But do you know what I mean? Would it bother him? Would it really affect his career?
Won't bother Dave Allen if he lost either, because he's had losses. So, you know, I don't get that. There's always, we're going a different route. What fucking route are you going? What route?
Yeah, what route are you actually going? What route are those two going right now?
Dave Allen and Cash Ali are in reverse with Dennis. That's the bottom line. I'm not saying that because I don't speak to Dennis no more. That's the bottom line, isn't it? If not, well, look on the box recs. They're inactive, very inactive.
Yeah, I want to see Cash Ali fight for a British title. I think he might be good enough to win a British title, and that'd be something he'll look back on in his career. And he'll be certainly more proud of winning a British title than the fights that he didn't take, or winning some continental European, just whatever it is.
Sometimes it's not always like it isn't brochure, is it?
Yeah.
I want to ask you about boxing border control and what you think is the best way forward, because it's going from bad to worse at the moment, isn't it?
Yeah. I think all license holders are responsible for the situation of boxing, not just the regulators, the border control, but all license holders all the way down to the bottom. I think what we need to do is we need to start at the top with the rule makers, obviously the border control. Easier said than done. It needs refreshing, re-energizing. We need to get some young blood in there. We need to get some business people in there, not just like boxing people or, you know, or legal people. We need to get some kind of marketing people in there, and just some different fresh blood. Let's have some diversity as well. I think diversity is important because you get that melting pot and you get some exciting results. But what the rest of the license holders need to do, and this has to start with the board, we need to stop giving a professional license to absolutely anybody. So anyone who's listening to me now is going to say, don't you work with Max? Yeah. Don't you work with Max Jenkins? And Max
shouldn't have been given a license, but because he wouldn't have got one in the UK, would he?
But don't hate the player, hate the game. I mean, I know a lot of license holders, I wouldn't give them a license. And that's not being cruel or being mean. This is a dangerous sport. It's like giving someone a driving license.
Who can't drive.
You're in charge of a car. You're in charge of people's lives. And if you can't drive, we're just going to hand it out because it's the thing to do, because we're worried about offending somebody. Absolutely not. So I would massively reduce the amount of professional boxers we've got in this country. And what do you get then? I understand that the UFC is an organization. I'm not stupid. I know the MMA route is splintered across various different organizations. But ultimately, you get quality all the way through, don't you, with the UFC, and you get round robins. So let's just say, for example, I'm not suggesting every journeyman has to lose his livelihood. I'm definitely not suggesting that. But it's a tired old format now. Left-hand side of the bill unbeaten. Kids, some of them can fight, some of them can't. Right-hand side of the bill, guys with 10% win ratios, if they're lucky. It's a tired old format. You can fill those scorecards in before the show's even started. 60-54, 40-36, We need to reduce the amount of fighters, that professional fighters that we've got in this country. We're not stopping people boxing. Go white collar, go amateur, do whatever you want to do unlicensed. But we need to have some purity and we need to have some quality. Don't just give everybody a coach's license. Get people through who can actually coach. Let's talk about the driving license analogy. You know, you can't have a guy who can't drive being taught by somebody who can't teach, can you? Yeah. Because it's going to be fucking disastrous, isn't it? So let's have
I've heard that one before. I heard that one.
I make this stuff up as I'm talking to you, mate. I'm full of shit. I know
it's a good one, though. If you can't teach somebody to fight and they can't fight, they want you to teach, and it's not going to end up very good, is it? If you get in with somebody who can fight.
Absolutely.
Is that why you jumped in with Max? Because you want to sort of save his bacon.
Bless him. He's definitely improving, is the lad. But I'm just honest. I'm honest with Max, and in a nice way, because he's a lovely lad. He's getting better. I don't care what anybody says. He trained last night. I'm doing once a week with him. He's getting better.
Cuddly teddy bear.
He's a big cuddly teddy, and he's brave. But ultimately, you have to have some standards in professional boxing. And I would say, I would clean out the boxing border control. I wouldn't get rid of everybody, because that's making an assumption that everybody in the border control doesn't do a good job. There's a lot of hard-working license holders. There's a lot of hard-working people on the board who do long hours for little reward. They're not all having a Beano. They're not having a holiday. They're not all creaming expenses. You got some of these referees who are traveling all over the place after doing a day's work. People have a hard job, but you need to clean it up. Okay, you're not going to change the rules of boxing. You have to change the standard of boxing. And guess what happens, as I've just said, Russell? So you've got these shows, suddenly all these opponents on the right-hand side who have got losing records or are incompetent, suddenly they're not there. Imagine they're not there. What happens? All these guys on the left-hand side who have got those winning records have to fight each other. Let's not keep bringing these imports in. Same guys who are getting stopped week in, week out, week in, week out. You know, the ones who turn up, get on the scales with the sunken chest and the little thin arms, these little Nicaraguans, and they're looking like that, and they don't know where to stand, and they don't know what to do. And I'm not being rude, I'm being honest. Let's stop these imports coming over. And then anybody who's the quality, let the cream rise and let people fight each other. You've had your 10 unbeaten, your 6 unbeaten. You guys are going to fight each other. And eventually you're going to get quality. And anybody who's not good enough to be in boxing is going to step out. You don't get massive mismatches in the UFC. You've got the cream fighters, you've got the elite fighters, you've got fighters who are not the best, but you don't have journeymen in the UFC. You don't have guys who are 0-10 in the UFC. You have some kind of quality. I know it's an organization. We have to have some quality in boxing. We have to reduce massively the number of professional boxers that we've got, because they're not, some of these guys are not good enough. Some of them are, some of them are fantastic. They're not good enough.
Do you think it needs somebody to come in and say to the board, look, can you give us a mark out of 10 on your performance as a governing body? And let's hear it from them. What mark would they give themselves out of 10? Now, if they say an 8, you can say, well, show us what you've done for it to be an 8.
What have you done to justify
if they say a 10, say, well, come on. If they say a 4 or a 5, can you say, well, do you think it might be time for you to go? It's just a couple of simple questions. That's all it is, mate.
It's an appraisal, isn't it? It's just employees have an appraisal. They get, the appraisal system's changed over the years. It's a little bit more kind of like fluid, but ultimately you get graded on your job. You work in a factory, you're on piece rate, you get graded on your job. Everybody gets graded in what they do. Okay. Look at the comments that you get. You get the harshest feedback of anybody. You've shown me emails you get that kind of feedback, but the border control don't have to answer to anybody. They can just do that when you're on or not watch it, but they have to start to answer to somebody, because they're clearly not answering to themselves. Yeah, I'm not rubbishing. I'm just saying it needs change.
We do need change, but how is it going to happen if there's nobody governing these? It's like in that film Casino where he goes, what do you mean? Somebody's skimming the skim that we're skimming? You know, that old codger.
Yeah, it's true. It's like
skimming the fucking skim.
Well, it's like a new broom sweeps clean, doesn't it? Yeah, let's reorganize it. What do you do? I work in project management, you know that. We work on big projects. And when you look at something that's not working or could work better, because we're all against massive headwinds right now, the economy's like absolutely screwed. We all have to come up with innovative ways of making money. We have to come up with innovative ways of doing what we do. So not all businesses are changing. The world's changing. The dynamics changing. We've gone from I'm not going into detail. We've gone from analog to digital, and we're into this new world. The border control haven't changed in God knows how long. It's the same faces saying the same thing, stamping the same low level of fighters with professional records. And do you know what now? You don't have to have any level of competence to be a professional fighter. They'll give you an interview, dig a little bit into your background. They used to do a bit of shadow boxing. They used to have a spar, but these kids now coming through who they shouldn't be boxing professionally. I've no issue with them boxing as long as they're medically fit to box.
Yeah.
I'm talking about professional fighters. I'm talking about the days when someone would say, do you know him there? Or you've been in a pub, you're in a working man's club. You talk about, Bruce Woodcock, and you say him over there is a professional boxer. remember the first professional boxer I ever met. It was Derek Wormald at the Frontier. Keith Tate's the manager. Good kid. He fought for the British title. I was in awe of him. I was like, wow, Derek Wormald. And he was just like a central area sort of level. He was a southpaw, tricky southpaw. Gary Stretch ironed him out, but he was a good kid. I was absolutely in awe. And I used to train at the side of the likes of Charlie Watson, who was a decent pro. He was about 15-5. You know, decent kids, really talented fighters.
Yeah.
And someone says they're a professional boxer now. I don't think it means anything. I don't mean to be disrespectful. It doesn't have the same kind of halo effect and luster that
It's
it used
gone
to have.
into like a white collar YouTuber type of thing. Do you think it's lost its sparkle a little bit?
Yeah, I think
it's a bit going a bit wrestling-y.
Yeah, it's gone down that route, hasn't it? I mean, there's still some really good quality fighters out there who are so competent and so good. But
women getting in ringing stockings and that. And it's professional bout on boxer. You mean stuff like that bothers you, doesn't it, Julian?
That bothers me a lot, mate. Someone getting into the ringing. So which inspector, honestly, I can't believe we're talking about this. Which board inspector has checked somebody's gloves and checked the tape and make sure they haven't nipped the gloves and all that kind of stuff, and allowed someone to walk into a televised bout wearing fishnet stockings? Just
Robert Smith on it, or Charlie Giles. Charlie Giles, what inspector? What is so? What is he inspecting?
He's inspecting the legs, isn't he? Clearly, but honestly,
allegedly,
and this is allegedly, of course. Be careful, mate. Be careful. Allegedly for everything tonight, mate. But this is where we're at, isn't it? I'm kind of caught between being a little bit old-fashioned and liking certain traditions, and I like some of the new stuff that they do at the shows. And it's, you know, we've got to. I talk about reinventing the board. We have to reinvent boxing sometimes, but you got to have good standards. You got to have a good standard of professional fighters. And I even think now we talked about this before, but some of the journeymen from 5, 10, 15 years ago, the Carl Allens of this world, they were as hard as nails. They were good, tough, solid. We always mention Willie Warburton, but good, tough, solid journeymen.
Willie Warburton smiles all the way through the fight like a Cheshire fucking cat, doesn't he? Grins like a cat.
Some of them are as hard as nails, and if they turned up in a bad mood that night, you're in for a tough night. I used to work a little bit with Chris Aston, trained and managed him. Youssef Alamidi. Now, in the early days, I know he lost his last God knows how many, but I did a little bit of pads with him and stuff. Youssef was, I think he was a Syrian national champion in the amateurs, and he came over here, earned a few quid. But if Youssef Alamidi turned up in a bad mood that night, and he'd had the old meeting with the board who says you need to get yourself a win, some unbeaten kid were going to get the fright of his life, and he beat Anthony Crawley, did Youssef, and the first kid to beat Crawley before Sykes. So what I'm saying is that there were even like the level of journeyman, from what I can see, seems to have just dropped now, that to the point we're getting a lot more imports who they're just awful.
What do you think about Savannah and the other girl, Clarissa?
Clarissa Shields. I look forward to that one. That's a really, really good fight, and it's a fight of, you can split that right down the middle. I believe that Marshall will beat her. I think she'll be hit too hard, too strong for her, a little bit too fresh for her. And I love what Peter Fury does with her as a fighter, but it's not hard to imagine Clarissa Shields firing in all cylinders with those rapid fire combinations. And Savannah Marshall hasn't had that kind of quality in front of her either as a professional.
Not been in a firefight, has she?
Exactly. It's not hard to imagine her really giving Marshall fits and beating Marshall over 10 rounds. So that's a fight of, you know, we when it comes to it, you and I will have a chat. We'll make some predictions. But I've always favoured Marshall. But when I sometimes instinctively go with a fighter, and then I go back and really sit down and have a think about that, Clarissa Shields is absolutely no mug at all, is she? She's a quality fighter. She's an absolute quality fighter. So that's a brilliant fight. Brilliant fight.
She's got a big old trumper on her.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. Yeah. But Peter Fury won't be taking anything lightly, mate. Well, there'll be no stone unturned there, mate. None at all.
I thought you were going to say something else then.
No, mate. I'm not being crude.
I'm glad anyway, because I think Savannah will probably retire now. So, because she can't go to America because Peter can't go, can he? So, I think she'll probably retire. But if not, she carries on good. But I don't think she'll stay in sport.
Well, she's not cut out for the sport in everything, but
she's already set up anyway.
Yeah,
set up for life anyway. So.
Yeah, she's done absolutely fine. She seems a really kind of like lovely person, a really good person, great ambassador for not for women's boxing. She's a great ambassador for boxing. I think that's how we need to start to talk now. But she's just one of those people who she's kind of like that round peg in a square hole where boxing's concerned, because she's too nice. She's not up her own ass, and it kind of shows, doesn't it, when you see these fighters who don't quite fit a certain shape. And they're largely inactive, you know what I mean? They get largely inactive. They're not pushed down your throat in social media all the time. But it'd be a great fight. You might even see two of that fight.
What about Yui against Hunter? Everybody's saying that's a crossroads fight. I don't see it as a crossroads fight.
No, I think
Huey will fight.
Yeah, Huey will beat him. He's got a little bit too much ring craft, but Hunter's got a lot of ring craft. It's a good fight. It's a distance fight. I think Huey. Yeah, Huey Fury will beat him on points.
That's the smart money, isn't it?
Yeah, definitely.
Huey on points, and then people having a go at him because they didn't knock him out. Then his dad will come out and they'll say, "Well, Huey's nearly got his man strength." and on and on and on and on and on it goes. I'm not having a go at Peter there. I'm just saying, for example, this is public. You know, and it's the same old fucking knackers, isn't it? Just get the fights, man. Let Huey beat Hunter, and then he's got to be mixed, then, hasn't he?
Yeah. I guess it's what is he in the mix for? That's always the problem, isn't it? Because he's clearly never going to fight.
It's going to be a couple of years now with all these managers coming up and all that, and getting back into the mix.
And that's the problem now, isn't it? They're all sidelined, aren't they? So
it's 4 years since he lost against Parker, isn't it? And, he's not had a chance, has he, since?
Can you imagine you get beat? Parker was a young man. He took on a world-class fighter, and you get beat in a close fight, and you're kind of sidelined for 4 years. It just wouldn't happen in any other sport, would it? Where you'd have to sit out. It's dreadful, really.
Yeah. Do you think Billy Joe will come back, Julian?
I can't see him coming back, and if he did, it'd have to be for a really big fight and a shitload of money, wouldn't it? But where's his motivation coming from now? What did he get for the Canelo fight? It was about 4.5-5 million or something. It was a big payday.
I've heard loads of rumours. He got paid well, then so he's set up and he's good with money. Do you think that if Billy comes back, he's going to come back and just be a gentleman, suit on and speak proper to people, or do you think he's going to come back and play villain?
He'll play the villain. That's what he does, isn't it? But the thing I kind of like about Billy Joe, and he's not one of my favourite fighters, by the way, but at least he's real, isn't he? Whether you think he's great or you think he's a dickhead or whatever, at least he's himself. He's true to himself.
Do you think he's robbed himself, though, with his talent that he's got, what he could have done?
Oh, he was just so gifted, wasn't he? I mean, he went the traditional route, didn't he? Went to the British, the
area, didn't he, as well? Southern
area champion, and he was just. I remember watching him in the amateurs. It was unbelievable, and so silky and so quick. But you could see he was just too inactive and didn't play the game, because even when he fought Andy Lee, he started so brightly and so quick, and he always would fade in fights after, just like he did with Eubank Jr. I mean, he won that fight, but it always faded, didn't he, over 12 rounds. After 5, 6, 7 rounds, it became hard work for him. And I think that's a lack of activity and a lack of eating right and living right. And it's always one of those things when fighters do this, and this is what Sykes used to do. They live really badly for 3 months, and then they knuckle down for 6 weeks. 8 weeks and crack on. You can get away with that for 4 or 5 times, but eventually that does catch up on you.
Does it?
Massively. It puts miles on the clock. And Ricky Hatton used to do the same thing. There's no, I know styles can kind of elongate careers, but there's no secret the fact that Floyd Mayweather at 36, 37, 38 was still a superb, fantastic world champion. And Bernard Hopkins was so successful because those guys didn't drink and they lived very, very clean. And then you look at fighters like Ricky Hatton. Ricky Hatton, 31, 32, was shot to bits, wasn't he? It's
fighting again, isn't he?
Yeah, listen, it's good to see him losing all that weight, actually. It's nice to see him.
He's always going to have a fight, isn't he? I don't think it happens.
Yeah, I mean, I think if it's giving him a purpose to get up in the morning and to eat right, to live right, not to drink, brilliant, good for him. But as I've mentioned this before, there still comes a time, because Tyson Fury says, people say, Fury will never retire because he's going to keep fighting because it's good for his mental health. He's got to stop sometime, hasn't he? At some point, fighters have to say, my boxing's done and I've got to have another purpose in life. I have to have something else to look forward to in life. And I don't know what Billy Joe Saunders is doing right now. He might be spending time with his family, he might have businesses, he might have property. He might be keeping really, really busy, which is good. But some fighters need boxing like a drug. And some, it's a bit of a chore to them, really.
Yeah, it's hard when you finish and the people stop asking about you and the phone stops ringing, and if you ain't got no plan, you're surrounded by people who're probably going to go down the wrong path, isn't he? Probably.
Yeah, and that's the thing, actually, going back to the first part of this interview, we're talking about Tyson Fury and the stick I got for suggesting that somebody could beat him.
Yeah.
5-10 years' time, there'll be somebody else, who's the latest phenomenon, the latest big heavyweight, and people will be saying such and such is the greatest fighter of all time. And
Fury to beat him, Fury power.
And it's just, you can't, things move on, don't they? And that, everybody's prime, you get to a stage where you go past your prime and you have to plan life after boxing. And I don't think Hatton, a bit like Fran Bruno, was really cut out for that, was he? He wasn't geared up for it. But some fighters retire and they just crack on with the life. I mean, look at Junior Witter. Junior Witter, former world champion, retired. He's coaching fighters. People I know speak to him.
Jim at back of us. He's got a gym opposite our factory.
He's happy with his life.
Smack opposite me.
Really, I didn't know that. But he's always out at the amateur shows. I used to see him when I was training a young amateur 3 or 4 years ago. Witter was always out with his fighters, so he's keeping busy, and that's what Ricky needs to do. He needs to keep busy.
Yeah. Okie dokie then, Julian. Well, listen, thanks for coming on.
You're welcome.
Hope you're well.
I'm well, and we've had no dog. George hasn't been barking tonight. George has behaved. Kelsey's not been making cups of tea.
Always hanging right kettle, isn't he?
Hey, we like a
tea belly, Julian.
He's like his dad, mate. I'm just the same. I like a tea. It's my weakness. I don't do anything else, so I drink way too much tea, mate. But I do appreciate you inviting me on, mate. I like coming on, and I look forward to seeing you tomorrow, you and Max, mate, and we'll catch up with Nicky Manners as well.
All right, you take care. Peace out, Julian.
Take care. See you later.
Bye.